to another episode of Let's Talk Weekly. I am Greg,
And I am Thomas.
and Josie will be back next week. She's feeling a little ill, so we will see her next week. All right, so today we will be talking about the topic of public transit and its issues and why it should be, basically nationalized as a free government service. Um, Thomas, we both, we take the bus to get to work and we rely on, public transit. I want to go ahead and just start the conversation with what your experience has, because it's so cool. I love the fact that you are from the UK and you have these double experiences. That's what I like. So my question is basically like how it is here in the States versus, or at least in California,
Mhm.
versus the UK.
I mean, I had several different experiences because where I grew up really in the middle of nowhere. I was in northwest of
Mhm.
England. I grew up in a very small village. Nothing anything like compared to what LA and California is like. Not even close to the amount of civilization. So when I grew up, we did have a bus service, but it ran every hour or every 30 minutes when I grew up. But as I got older, and because of cuts in services, it got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. To a point where it actually completely stopped temporarily at one point. There was no bus service running at all. Um,
Wow.
in the middle, and when you live in somewhere where you live in the middle of nowhere, where the only other alternative to transport is the automobile, it really messes with people, particularly
Yeah.
the old generation who no longer drive or no longer own a car. Um, so I had that experience, and then later on, I went and lived in a city called Leeds. So I had a bit more sort of an idea of what public transit could be. It was very good, I have to say. It was particularly because it was a student city. The public transit system or the bus service system ran very late at night. It ran way into the early hours of the morning, 3 a.m., 4 a.m.
Wow.
But it was also expensive. It wasn't cheap. So it's I don't know. It's a case of I mean I've come here and it's if you're only using local. I find here if you're only using local transit services. So for example, me and you we both use Foothill Transit, which is a local bus transit system. Um, it can be somewhat affordable to an extent. Um, However, it could be miles better. I
Yeah.
think we'll get into that in the discussion.
Yeah, so and public transit around this country because it's so big, it's very
Hmm.
different from state to state. It can, in New York City, I went to go visit and um from what I experienced, I loved the MTA. It ran
Hmm.
all day. I was able to get to the airport. I was able to go to the airport to catch an early 6 a.m. flight using the
Yeah.
MTA and then the New Jersey rail system to get to Newark. I was able to do that. And I, have also used public transit to get to the airport here. And the difference was it was extremely different because
Yeah.
um one, I couldn't do that at 3 a.m.
Hmm.
Over here, but in New York I could, which was great. It is
Hmm.
very expensive, you know um and people do have trouble with it, and it's very sad because the MTA is very over policed. There has been footage of literally police officers beating people just because they want to because they need somewhere to go and they
Hmm.
need to hop the rail system sometime or hop over the thing, you know.
Yeah.
And that's very, it's very disgusting because this thing should be free. It should be more accessible. Um, like for example, right now, the Foothill Transit, the system both Thomas and I use this, is dealing with a very severe driver shortage to where now if I want to get somewhere on time, for me personally, I need to use Uber. And what also sucks is that not every bus stop has a bench. Now you're probably thinking, oh, what's a bench got to do with it? Well, if you're disabled like me and can't stand for a very long time, that's a big deal, especially when a bus is 30 or 40 minutes late or even an hour late, because then there's nowhere to sit. You have to lean or something. And yeah, so that's my issue with the buses currently. And it would be great if, instead of every 30 minutes, it could be every 15 or every 10. And not only that, when you look at most bus rail route or bus maps, a lot of places are not accessible using the bus. I can't go to Chino Hills. I can't really go to Orange County via bus. There's a lot of places where I can't go using the bus because they basically use the same redlining map to create bus routes, because
Yeah.
who uses the bus? Marginalized communities, and they don't want
Yeah.
their white little neighborhoods being tainted um by colored folks using the buses in their area.
And, this is the major difference with the experience I had in the UK to here with using public transit. And I think it's more, you're right, it's more to do with, I mean, the UK, the historical, the way that they built towns and roads, and it was all geared around like one road that runs through the whole town.
Hmm.
And because of that, a lot of the bus stops stop next to housing. It stops next to where people would live. And so you're never in this situation where bus stop is, you stop here. I mean, the very first place I lived here, the nearest bus stop was a 20-minute walk away, 25-minute walk away, right?
I could never do
20
that.
minute walk.
I literally could
Right.
never.
And that's because of America's decision to build suburban housing away from main roads, to have bus routes not go into suburban housing areas. They steer clear of the actual housing roads or the roads that lead into the suburban housing area. And so you end up in this situation where, the bus stops are just on the main roads, but they're not actually close to, or you're lucky if the bus stops are close to the actual housing area or where your house is located because of this, because of, you're right, redlining, and because of um, zoning laws here. It's almost like we could have the same conversation about the convenience store, right?
Yeah.
That you can't build convenience stores next to housing because of zoning laws. Like you can't have businesses within a certain square foot of certain housing areas, and that's where you have, you have miles of suburban housing with no actual amenities or utilities close by, but you'd have to drive to it because there's no other way of
Yeah.
getting to it. and
That's why I
that's
really
and
like
that's
the city. Like that's why I'm such a city person too.
Yeah.
Like in the city, like for example, New York City, you can like the grocery store is like a 2-minute walk right there. The post office is a 3-minute walk over there. You know,
Mhm.
we live in such a car-centered like society where you need a car. And that is so bad for the environment too. If you have a car for every person, that's producing so much CO2 and just building onto people's carbon footprint. If you have a, you know, let's transition over to the conversation of a free public transit system, more people will use the bus. More people will then thus decrease their carbon footprint, and will actually do better for the environment. And not only that, but replacing it with a high-speed electric rail system, or using electric buses. Some of the electric buses that Foothill uses are amazing. Feels like I'm floating. Go ahead,
Think
Thomas.
of it. Think of it. I mean, you could use the logic of a business, right?
Mhm.
You need to create the demand for the demand to come to you, right? And
Yeah,
so from that perspective, even if you went from that perspective, you treat it the same way with public services. Public services is a circle, right? If the public service is bad, or it's not very operable, or it's sort of half in, half out, people don't feel like they can rely on it, and so they end up going down the second option, is they have to get a personal automobile, which
mhm,
unfortunately the personal automobile is great if you have a lot of money. If you don't, it's very costly. It's very expensive to run. It's very expensive to own. And unfortunately, we're trapped in this situation where everyone feels like they have to have their own personal automobile because the latter option, the public service option, does not meet the standards. So if the auto, or it doesn't at least come close to, the automobile will never obviously replicate the public services will not ever replicate entirely an automobile, because an automobile, you can go directly to exactly where you want to go. But if you have a public service that gets close to that, people won't feel trapped in having to use the automobile every single day, especially when it comes to things. you know we don't get compensated for going to work when we probably should be compensated to drive to and home and from work, because we're forced to go to this place to do the work, right?
yeah, it
But
costs
if we
money.
had a public service system that actually, ran pretty well, at least you wouldn't be having to put uh, uh, expenditure on your own automobile to
Mhm.
go somewhere 5 days a week. Um, you don't have to put the toll of using your automobile 5 days a week, and all the expenses are rack up from doing that.
Yeah.
It's like prime example, students here get the Metro card, or they get a student Metro card that gives them access to everything.
Yeah,
Trains gives them
I
access
love
to.
the fact that I can hop on, the bus, and I know I can go anywhere for free. And that's the thing. Like, people are like, well, it's too expensive to do that. They can't do that. They did it during the pandemic. They did it for a year and a half,
But
and
think, think for a sec. If we had the student card accessible to every single person, right? If you just did away with all the different transit passes and all the different like zoning passes, you just had one card that said you pay a lowly fee of $30. For me and you, we believe it should be free, right? But even if you just had one pass that said you can use anything, and I mean anything, the metro, the trains, the buses, like everything that comes with, you'd have the service would fund itself because you've created a
yeah, like
demand.
$30 a month for anything. I think that's reasonable. I'd pay for it.
Yeah.
It's not hard. You're right. If they would act like real capitalists and create a demand like you said, then they will have a great time with it. It's almost as if they don't want people to have a good time with it. They don't want people to have access to going to work, or just access to going to the places they need. It's almost as if they want to keep people trapped. Interesting.
Well, it goes against the whole psychology of, you have to have a good infrastructure system to improve business outcomes, right? If we're going down the capitalist logic, right? The
Hmm.
problem is they're pushing infrastructure back on to the people that are already doing the work, right? They're pushing all the costs associated with infrastructure back on to the people that do the actual work, right? Rather than them subsidizing the infrastructure to benefit them, it all benefits themselves if the infrastructure is good, right? And it's the same. You can go into a deeper conversation about how this is being entrenched into the post office, also with Amazon. It's taking advantage of the post office, right?
Yeah.
And using publicly funded. It's all a benefit to them. They benefit from a strong post office, right? They benefit from a strong postage system that is publicly funded because they don't have to pay the said postage system,
Hmm.
right? All this benefits everybody, but it just comes down to the fact that there are a lot of insanely rich, greedy people who do not want to feel like the funding infrastructure that they deem lesser than, that they deem that is above them, that they don't, they'll never have to use ever.
Yeah. And people think that this would just fall apart. And we see it all over the world where they invest in their public transit. Japan has a high-speed electric train, and we're still burning coal. Tell me how Japan is living its 21st century life when we're still living in the 1800s. Like,
The problem is people can't, unfortunately, here, because of the way because of the way infrastructure has been designed, right? Because of the way things have been built for the last 50, 60 years, right? Nobody can visualize a transit system in this current in the way the infrastructure has been built. You'd have to it all comes back to you're going to have to pump a lot of money into a fully functioning transit system that works, and nobody wants to do the long-term project. Everyone wants to do the short-term fix. Everyone
well,
wants to
yeah,
do the
because
easy thing.
if you do long term, you actually uplift people who desperately need it, like the working class, disabled folks, the elderly, those who are elderly and disabled. They know that they would have a leg up afterwards. Like, come on, it's a no brainer. If I can
Yeah,
take the bus and not have to walk, you know, even 5 minutes is hard for me. You know,
yeah.
if I can just open the door and the bus stop was right there, I'd probably cry. But
Yeah. and
yeah,
that and I'm in a very privileged position now because that is kind of what's happened to me now. I live somewhere where there's a bus stop literally a minute outside my house, compared to when I first came here, it's 25 minutes outside my house or 20
and
minutes
honey,
outside
you
my house.
deserve that. Like, kudos to
And
you.
so and so, and now I only take one bus to get to the place that I go 5 days a week, and it only takes me 10 minutes or 50 minutes tops on the bus to get there. Right? That is a privilege. I know that's not anything like what the system
Yeah.
is here for the majority of people. And I really wish that we had more here. It could be so good here, and there's no reason why this Los Angeles County, one of the biggest cities in the world,
Hmm.
does
Bigger
not
than most
have a better
states.
functioning public service system.
Hmm. Yeah, literally, Los Angeles County, it has one of the most densest populations in the country. Its population is outnumbers most states. And it should be able to provide a service to get people to where they need.
Yeah,
Like I mentioned earlier, if they want to be good capitalists, pretty sure making sure people can get to work and get to stores so they can buy things would stimulate the economy. But hey, I'm just a socialist. What do I know? But
right.
go
And
ahead and close this off, Thomas.
Yeah, I was going to say, the topic on, uh, you know, free transit and why public transit should be a given. And I think the answer is simple. It's it does. You're not stuck in this one option, right? You're not stuck in this option of I either have to go by car or
Mhm.
motorcycle or whatever your personal automobile is, and you're stuck in that option. The moment your car breaks down, the moment your motorbike breaks down, whatever it is, and you are being told you have to get into work, you're being told that your jobs now you have job insecurity because what happens if you're
Yeah.
out of work? You're out of your
Yeah, it
job
would
for
literally expand employment opportunities too. Because there's certain jobs I
yeah.
had to turn down because it wasn't accessible via public transit.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, and I see it here in the job application process where they ask you if do you have a driver's license because they're worried about you being able to get to work. And I think that like I said, this uplifts everybody. It
mhm.
doesn't force people into a situation where they have to rely on one thing, and it benefits every single person in this whole region, in this whole area.
Yeah,
And it's a case, it'll do wonders, not just for yourselves individually, but it'll do wonders for communities. It would bring communities together. It would stop this situation where communities are divided because people can't get to and from places easily enough.
yeah,
Um, there's just a lot of factors. And the other thing is the sprawl that we're seeing with parking. Parking sprawl is a major issue because
yeah,
of the fact that we're so reliant on the automobile. It's causing places that should be walkable to no longer be walkable at all because of the sprawl that we're seeing.
yeah,
But yeah.
yeah. Well, that's our conversation on public transit, folks. Keep thinking, keep having these conversations. And if you can use public transit, be good on your carbon footprint, always be mindful. I know the people who, when we're going to be talking about climate with our fun topic, and the big people we should be pointing our fingers to are corporations. But if we could do better personally, I think that's always good too. So, all right,
Mhm.
now for our fun topic. So this week on The View, protesters basically interrupted an episode while interviewing Senator Ted Cruz, good old Ted Cruz. We're gonna go ahead and show y'all what happened on the audience side because you're able to hear what they were saying. When it was airing, you do hear it, but you don't hear what they say. And I think it's important that y'all hear what they say. Okay, so let's watch.
Now! Cover climate now! Cover climate now! ABC needs to cover climate change more instead of platforming a climate denier like Ted Cruz. ABC spent less than 6 hours last year covering climate change, and now they're platforming someone like Ted Cruz, whose climate denial is resulting in terrible policies. Cover climate now! ABC needs to cover climate change more, and we do cover climate change. And guess who? Cover climate now!
Excuse us. Let us do our job. Let us do our job. We hear what you're.
So I think that was amazing. I First of all, I don't know if y'all have ever been to TV tapings. That was pretty cool of them because they had to stand in line for a while. And that's if you had one iota. That's including if you had one iota tickets, because I went to go see Jimmy Kimmel, and even then I had to stand in line for a while. So they stood in line for a while. They finally got past all the stuff, and they're sitting and watching the show. And they did that. That took balls. That took guts. And I'm really glad that they were able to do that. And they're right. I have been watching it since I was a teenager. I only watch it because I've been watching it since I was a teenager. And I also want it so I know what kind of bullshit that the corporate media is spewing so I can debunk it. And that was crazy. That was really crazy. So Thomas, go ahead and give me your thoughts on this.
Well, I think what it comes back to is, why is the media not covering climate
Mhm.
correctly, properly? Why is it not informing people correctly? Why is it not? Why is there this underlying issue with our mainstream media not taking this seriously? And I link it. I look, you can look at the same argument, but with smoking. So for years, smoking was advertised as being, in some cases, good for you. Doctors would
That's kindness.
even advertise, even by the way, when I reference smoking, I'm on about cigarettes and tobacco. FYI, I have nothing against the other kind of smoking. Um, However, for years, the tobacco industry was able
Mhm.
to basically peddle something that they knew was causing harm, was causing cancer, to hundreds of thousands, millions of people. And it wasn't until the media started disclosing the actual medical science and what it was actually doing to people
Mhm.
that there was a backlash against it. And in turn, there's now federal policy to mitigate people from smoking tobacco in public
But
places.
we also got to remember that climate action or action towards fighting climate change doesn't make money, especially
No,
the big corporations. So of course they're not going to want to cover climate as much, and it's sad because I could see it in the face of Sunny Hostin, who's really good on a lot of issues. And I know sometimes she wants to say the real thing, but she can't, because and that's one of the issues with media. We're going to talk about media later this season, but just it's sad. Like I will never be able to. I would never be on MSNBC, not just because of how they align politically, it's because they would never let me on. I'm
well, I was I was going to say a large part of the problem is the businesses that are involved in this cover up on climate, and a large part of the problem. I mean, not 100% of the issue, because there is a little bit of personal responsibility, but a large part of the issue is fossil fuel companies. And what they've done is they've created a way to have the media almost they're in a position where they feel like they can't disclose the articles that they should be doing, because the fossil fuel companies are buying advertising
yeah,
in their media publications.
yeah.
They're also creating these arguments around, well, we're actually trying to do something. People like Chevron are like publishing things about biofuel and how they're trying to greenify their business going forward. And it's all a bunch of rubbish. The whole thing is just, it's a way to deflect from the serious issues of what fossil fuel companies are doing as a contribution to climate and the ramifications of it. And I said the large part of the problem is that they bought advertising space in these media companies that is ultimately leading to a situation where media is no longer able to publish
Um,
what they should be publishing
and
because there's a conflict of interest.
yeah, I'm so sorry. There was an audio lag.
No,
But
no, you're
the
right.
protesters made a good point. Why is ABC covering this climate denier, this election denier, by the way?
Yeah.
He says that he's not, but come on, we all know what team he's on. And while his own state, he fled his own fucking state while they were going through a climate crisis event 2 winters ago. Their state was literally frozen. Texas is a desert, y'all. So if he wants to just, and that's the thing, these rich motherfuckers are can continue. They know it's a thing, but they're not going to be affected by it because one, they're old as fuck. And two, even when they do have grandchildren, they're going to have money to be okay. But anyway, if you live in New York City, get your ass on One Iota and get some view tickets, get some talk show tickets, and you get into that audience and you say your voice, because apparently now we can do it. And I think that is amazing. I applaud those people. And if we can continue doing it, then we can have our voices heard. That's all I'm going to say. But yeah. Oh, did you want to close it off, or?
I was going to say that the climate in the fossil fuel industry has had so many stories of corruption, of funding rogue militias and countries to, in some cases, kill and wipe out indigenous people in the name of profit. In fact, Netflix even has a documentary called Virunga about it, where they went in and just watch the documentary. It's very enlightening. British oil companies go in and anyway.
Yeah.
So there's so many stories of the outright abuse and corruption, and the way that they're protecting their own industry, because they see what's coming and they don't want to end up like the tobacco industry, where there's serious federal limitations of what they can do and how they can go forward. And it's I think of the stories like the lawyer Dozinger, who was jailed by Chevron because of his acts of protecting indigenous people in the Amazon with the oil spill. They will fight back, but it's heartening to see people, even when they feel powerless, do something as simple as just interrupt a TV show, because we have to do something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, folks, thank you again for watching another episode of Let's Talk Weekly. We will be back next Wednesday. I'm Greg.
And I'm Thomas.
And we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.